Hey folks, every now and then we run into a diamond in the rough. One of these guns that you don't come across very often, and it's got a unique kind of characteristic to it, and the feel of it. Maybe there's not a bunch of them out there. I've actually been fortunate enough to actually have that happen to me here recently. This is a Bushmaster M17S. This is a pretty cool little bullpup design. Somewhat unique because there's not a ton of them out there. And I felt like I want to take this thing out here and give it a little bit of a run. As you can see, it's definitely got its standard bullpup design. You're going to have your magazine, and all your action is going to be behind the trigger and the pistol grip. But this one here is a little bit different than some of the bullpups that you may have seen out there, in that it has the way you charge it, you grab the carry handle, the rear of it actually pulls back. So if you notice, your whole bolt is being manipulated by this carry handle, the portion of the carry handle, the back portion of it. Luckily enough, the front end of the polymer of the handle, the rest of the handle, is supported pretty well. But this is definitely where you're going to get your charging and your action from. All your spring mechanism and everything is inside here. And we'll take that down for a second and show you. But definitely a pretty cool gun. This thing here, origins back in Australia, I want to say 1996. I'm sorry, 1986. A company by the name, I believe, was Armtech, were developing prototypes of this, and they had two different prototypes. It's pretty interesting how their trials went. They had a standard prototype that used standard ammunition, I should say, and then they had a prototype that used caseless ammunition. Well, that could have very well been the beginning of the caseless ammunition revolution, as it were, because you're hearing about it now. But unfortunately, timing couldn't have been any worse, because the caseless ammunition version of this M17S actually had a, I wouldn't say a catastrophic failure, but it basically blew up inside the rifle during the trials whenever they had the full audience, their huge group of people that they wanted out there to actually see the two different weapons as they were being tested. So really bad timing for, I think it was a C30R. Really bad timing for that rifle. So needless to say, the caseless ammo version of this particular rifle never came to bear. You know, maybe at some point it will, but definitely not in this particular version, because again, timing couldn't have been worse. During this whole process with Australia, the Australian Army actually ended up adopting the Steyr AUG and pretty much abandoned the whole M17S. And at that point, another company ended up buying the right, but essentially Bushmaster ended up with all of the rights of the M17S, because the company that was manufacturing them and had gotten the plans for it and the rights to build it in the United States went out of business. So Bushmaster was actually producing those in the United States, so by default everything kind of went to Bushmaster. And that was when Bushmaster was in Maine. That was whenever it was the real and the original Bushmaster, before that Freedom Group took it and gutted it and ruined it. So they were still making good rifles out of Windham, Maine, which, by the way, is the exact same location and the exact same people who build Windham weaponry rifles now. So it was quality that went into these rifles back then. These rifles were produced up until about 2005, and you just don't see any anymore. This particular serial number is actually a pretty early serial number on here. It's 2021 is the serial number. So that's a pretty early serial number, although there weren't a ton of these made. But nevertheless, having an early serial number is kind of cool. Everything on this thing is workable, functional, and to prove that, we're going to take some shots with it. Now, the rifle itself does use standard GI magazines. Any of the Magpul, Hex Mag, any of those magazines will in fact fit in here. What I've done is I've put a 6 Sauer Romeo optic on top, because the one drawback to this particular weapon is that it does not have iron sights. Some of the models do have an iron sight that's kind of embedded into the carry handle, that has a post. Basically your front sight is up front here, and your rear sight is right here at the back of the carry handle. Very small sight radius. This model does not have that. So again, I have a little bit of an optic right here. So this is the first shot. I've never fired this thing before, and there's no telling how long it's been since this thing has actually been fired either. Let me get a little bit of power up front here. All right, let's see here. Optics are a little high for me. There we go. Oh yeah. I gotta aim a little high with this red dot. Thing shoots good. One thing I notice on it, Very little recoil. I know it's a 5.56, but extremely low recoil. Again, if you notice, this thing is barely moving in my body. It's got a dual recoil spring, smaller recoil spring mechanism up in here. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Kind of like the MPX has by 6 Hour. So that could be lending itself to that lower recoil, but the weight of the rifle also, it's a pretty heavy rifle. One of the drawbacks to this rifle that I will tell you about, and later models kind of corrected that, if you'll notice, this housing is all sealed, or I say sealed, it's all closed off. If you notice, the front of it's closed off. This whole mechanism is closed off. It needs to be vented. The only vents are right here on top, these holes on the top. That's not enough to cool this thing down. I'll show you. If I shot what I just shot, maybe 10 rounds there, 15. See, I can feel this thing heating up. This handguard is heating up. Not unbearable. In fact, I can feel more heat coming out of the top, but nevertheless, this thing's getting hot. Again, some of the future, later generations of this, actually they vent the whole sides of it, kind of like an M-LOK design. Definitely helps to vent this thing and cool this whole barrel off. Because again, you're talking about the action is taking place back here, so that whole explosion is happening all throughout here. And what we're doing is we're capturing all of that heat and keeping it inside. We're not allowing this thing to breathe. So definitely probably a little bit of a design flaw there. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out in terms of reloads is your mag release. Okay, this has a unique design to it. It's got its own pros and its own cons. If you notice, your mag release is a very standard mag release that you're going to see on an AR-15. However, it's obviously in a different position. On a standard AR-15, you're going to fire your weapon until it runs dry, and then your mag release that looks just like this is right here. So your hand, your main hand never leaves your pistol grip. You drop your mag release and you put another one in with this hand always remaining in place. In this case, you have two options. Option one is not a good option. If you want to continue releasing that magazine with your right hand that you normally would on an AR-15, you would have to run it back here, push that button, which will release your magazine, and then go back up front, and then use your left hand to drop the magazine in there, or to place the next magazine, the fresh one, in there. Not a good idea, as far as I'm concerned. What I would prefer to do is you have a paddle on this side. Note this paddle right here. Again, that's the one that is also going to mimic your mag release on the right-hand side. So that if you are shooting and you run dry, it's simply a matter of pressing this paddle. And if you're really wanting to get tactical, which I'm not a tactical superstar, but if you want to get tactical with it, you can do it similar to an AK-47. Use your magazine, come over here, hit that button, drop your mag, and then go straight in there with your fresh magazine, and then you're good to go. This is your bolt release right here, so as you're doing that motion, you could also hit that and send that bolt forward and resume shooting. So that's the only downside that I see to the placement. I hate to use this phrase, but it is what it is. You know, you've got all your action and everything back here, so there's not a whole lot that can go on. I know some newer models of different bullpups are still trying to keep a lot of their stuff forward, but all of the action being back here is going to require some of the other things moving rearward also, and unfortunately that's what happens with the mag release. You know, guys, this thing is fun to shoot. The M17S has probably all the cool things about it that I like about a gun. Uniqueness, functionality, never misfired at all today. The only drawback, like I said earlier, guys, is the heat being retained in this whole housing right here and not being properly ventilated. I got to tell you, this thing's hot to the touch right now. It's hot. I stopped firing this thing maybe 5 minutes ago, and maybe, see, about 5 magazines, so just under 150 rounds. I actually didn't fire all of the last one. So 150 rounds and this thing is smoking hot. It's fun to shoot. Bullpups are fun to shoot anyway. The optics on top, they rest on there nicely. I would probably like to shoot one of the versions with the iron sights, but Bushmaster guys, back when it was the same Windham guys that make Windham weaponry rifles now, who built this rifle, it is what I expect it to be. It runs consistently. I know they hated working on these. Eric Winter, the the lead gunsmith up there at Windham Weaponry. He's put his hands on many of these over the years, and he'll be the first ones to tell you that he's not real fond of busting one of these open and working on it. But my guess is they probably didn't need much working on. Guys, if you don't mind, check us out on our Facebook page, our Instagram, our Twitter, our Gun District page. Subscribe to us here on YouTube if you don't mind. That helps us out a lot. And yeah, if you have any questions, email me, Paul@legallyarmedamerica.com. Again, Paul@legallyarmedamerica.com, and I will get back to you.